What is up, YouTube? As you can see, we are back at the Falcon once again. Got it running, driving. I've been driving it not quite daily status, but drove it to work a couple times. It's running okay. The last time I was messing around with the shocks, I messed up on the rear end. I loosened some stuff up and retightened it. We're offset by about half an inch to the passenger side, so if you come around to the back side, the tire gap there is pretty much just shy of flush, just over flush with the fender. You come over to this side, you got a ton of tire hanging out over that fender lip, or where the fender should be. I know it's all rusted, but we'll address that later. So I gotta loosen the U-bolts on the rear end and basically just shift that over a little bit. I'll still drive it that way. It's probably not a great idea, but whatever. But on the inside of the motor, I put some actual coolant in this, but if you haven't noticed from the quick little glance, distributor's off, carb is off, fuel lines are loose. Did get an oil leak on the manifold for the first time in 5 or 6. Never had an issue. For whatever reason, this time when I was messing around with it, you're not going to be able to see it because it's filled with water and coolant right now. But down underneath here, that little valley right here, you can see this nice little puddle of water right now down on top of the timing cover. This little coolant hose is pretty much leaking straight water into that. I did just flush this out and add coolant to it. It hasn't been overheating or anything like that, but I don't want to have to deal with this later on. And the last time I drove this to work, I had a big old puddle of oil underneath it when I left. So I was trying to kind of chasing down the leaks there. I sprayed everything down. There's no air leaks, but I am getting a little bit of oil seepage from the intake manifold. Distributor side is good. I'm bone dry over here, but I was getting a big old black puddle of oil down here in this valley, which means that the bottom corner of this intake manifold is not sealing proper. The valve covers, the heads, all of those things are good and sealed up. There's nothing there. Then if we come along to the back side here, this is a nice big old oil puddle, which means it's leaking right at the base corner of this. So my RTV wall did not work. Done probably 6 or 7 of these without any issue. This is the first one that I've actually had leak, and of course this is the one that I had to call out other people on the internet about torquing these to proper specs and doing the entire book version of it. Oh well, I messed up. I'll be the first one to admit it. Not saying the guy was wrong, however, I've had intake manifolds on and off of these cars in various states as quickly as possible. I'm about 15 minutes into the teardown here. Got the carb sitting on the ground right now. Everything else is disconnected. Not that big of a deal. So basically, I'm going to zip the intake manifold bolts off of this real quick, pry this up, scrape some gaskets. I might try and reuse the intake gaskets just because it's end of season and I won't be driving it all that much. If it's just the China wall seal, which I'm fairly certain it is, then I'm going to scrape the RTV, clean those up, brake clean everything really nicely. We'll see. If I pull the intake off and it's all sorts of stuck and the gasket rips and there's all sorts of issues, then we'll dig further into it and address that. If I can do a temporary quick fix for right now, just because it is the end of season, that's fine too. But even right now, I'm out of space in the driveway. I needed to flip-flop cars and go get my wagon. And I can't do that because I'm storing this at my folks' house. They just got their driveway redone. I don't want to put a giant leaky, oily mess in their driveway. Here's what it is. Hot rod chopper problems. Everything I own leaks. It's great. Super, super fun. All right, intake manifold is off completely. That's how quick that went. These gaskets are actually in pretty good shape. It's not the right way to do it. I would recommend replacing this anytime you do these. But if I look on this backside where I know the leak was coming from, right here, got a nice heavy bead all the way across here. So that was good. That was good. Corner seal is good. All the way to here. A little bit of a break on this backside. Right there where it thins out. And right here is the concerning part. I only have the inner seal here on the intake. However, this side, I'm down to bare metal. I know some of that came off with the manifold, but not that much. So I will build up a thicker wall there, scrape the rest of these gaskets up. I'm going to reseal these corners really good. Even on this front side, it's a little thin here. I will be the first one to admit that I was 100% rushing this as quickly as possible when I slapped this together, because it was the second time I got to do all of this. So if you like playing hot rod and doing a ton of motor work and motor swaps and switching things to repeat the same thing over and over again, do what I did and rush through it. Or be smart, do it the right way the first time. However, in this case, I don't feel nearly as bad because I don't take the full blame for the lifter issue that I ran into on this motor. I'm going to soak up as much as I can on the inside of this, try and clear it out. I will be doing an oil change pretty quick here because I think I am at about that 100-mile mark on a brand new build. Flush all this out, but let me dry all this up and we'll bring you back when I go to reinstall. Intake manifold on the ground, carb on the ground, just draining everything. Sun's going down. I got a whopping like 15 minutes before it gets dark. Got all the RTV scraped off of this. I still got to do the intake manifold and prep that. I was going to try and get all of this done today. If you've never pulled an intake manifold off of a car before, it will make a gigantic mess. There's coolant passages here and here and in the back that will leak coolant everywhere. So essentially, if you are doing this, make sure you know that you also need to do an oil change relatively quickly. As careful as you want to be, you're still going to get a ton of water and coolant in from these ports onto the top here, into the valley, lifter valley. Everything in here flows right down to the bottom of the block. So now I have a ton of coolant and water and whatever, as careful as I was, whatever RTV and silicone is sitting at the bottom of the intake valley. So it ended up being, well, I was just over ambitious. Took on way more than I could chew for a 45 minutes of window of working. Yanked the intake gaskets off. Like I said, I was going to try and reuse these. They're not in the worst of shape. In all honesty, they'd probably be fine. Do not quote me as saying, oh, reuse old gaskets. I would never say that. You should replace them. I think these will be okay. I also happen to have an extra set sitting on the shelf in the garage. Oh, it doesn't make sense for me to sit here trying to be a cheap bastard when I'm literally taking this apart because I messed up rushing through and didn't put enough silicone on the China wall last time. So I'll put new gaskets on, oil filter, oil, then we'll drop it back in. I don't mind doing the oil change right now, and like I said, this isn't the worst thing in the world. I'm at that 50 or 100 miles. It's probably around 100 miles of runtime on this motor and actual drive time, which on a brand new build, I don't necessarily mind. I'm not a huge, 50 miles, change the oil. Another 50 miles or 100 miles, change the oil. I'm sure that's probably better. I'm sure that probably helps. However, I'm a realist and oil is not getting any cheaper. So if I can go 50, 75, 100 miles, a vulture up there, 50, 75, 100 miles, change the oil once, that's the end of my break-in, other than, 500, 600, 1,000 miles or so. 500 I usually like to do if everything, it's brand new bearings, crank bearings, main bearings, rod bearings, piston rings, all of that. There's a ton of metal on metal parts rubbing in there. Not a bad idea to change those as quickly as possible. Roller cam, I'm a little less concerned than I would have been on the break-in procedure for a flat tappet, which didn't work anyway, so there's that. But I will do a flush on all this. Oil change, new intake gaskets, reseal this up. I'm gonna double up on the China wall. I put a pretty good bead on last time. I will put a bigger bead, and I think the issue I ran into is right in this corner where the head meets the block. That's typically the main weak spot in terms of leaks on that. On a brand new build, I don't want to be chasing oil leaks. I know I got one little drip coming down from the oil dipstick plug that I still haven't fixed. That's fine. If I know what it is, it works. When it starts at the top of the block like that, and I'm getting a puddle on the trans tunnel, or on top of the trans, and then on top of the intake, when it's running, as that's leaking, leak gets bigger, it drips, it runs down everything and coats the entire underside of the car. Don't want that. Brand new build, we're gonna try and address it and do it right this time. Hopefully I'll have a little bit more time and a little bit more patience and make sure everything goes on super thick. But like I said, I've done 6 or 7 of these. This is the first one that I've had actually leak on me. I've had coolant hoses leak, or this little crossover tends to leak pretty easily. But it is what it is. Live and learn. Messed that one up. I'll take full responsibility on that one since I built the motor myself. Anything that goes wrong is completely on me. Other issues, the overdrive is shot. I'm 100% convinced on that one. Whatever. Live and learn. Junkyard mode, well, secondhand motor and trans that were supposed to be working. It did work. It shifted a couple times into overdrive, but it never, even the first couple days, if you go back to the first time I actually drove this to the shop video, I think I have in-camera footage. I say it hit fourth. It did click into fourth. It engaged in fourth. It did not like staying engaged in fourth gear, which is what it is. Trans is worn out and shot. If I gotta learn how to rebuild an AOD, that'll be also a fun video. I'm a cheap bastard. I can't spend $1,000 or $800 or whatever it is for a trans rebuild. I looked at a couple videos on AOD teardowns. They make perfect sense to me, kind of. Definitely a little bit of variation there. I know I got that 3-speed trans sitting on that workbench. That one, I have no concern whatsoever about taking apart, but it's all mechanical. When you get into the AOD stuff, there's a valve body and a bunch of different pucks and different clutch baskets for reverse and forward gear, plus the drum and how all of that works. Let's try it. If I mess it up, I'll have learned something and it'll make it worth my while. And down underneath the bench here, you can see the torque converter and another trans. That AOD was good and working. I know that for a fact. I actually drove that car. I did not drive it in overdrive. I did not get it up to speed, so hopefully that one's okay, but it did come out of a running and driving 83 Grand Marquis, and based on the rest of the car, it was so minty. I feel bad for it because that car ended up getting demo derbied, even though it was one of the cleanest cars that I've seen in a long time, especially for an 83. But I know that trans is good. It's an AOD. Everything else is the same. I got to change the shifter if I want to just drop that trans in, which is way faster. So at some point, maybe this winter, I'll drive this over to the shop, put this up on the lift, grab a trans stand or trans jack and do a flip-flop, because doing that with a trans jack on a lift is substantially easier than doing it in the giant crater of a driveway. But that's where we're at right now. I'm gonna wrap up the intake manifold video for now. I'm not gonna do another install video because I think I have 2 or 3 of them. I don't even remember anymore. But that's where we're at. Leaving it tonight. I will be out of town this weekend, so I'm not gonna be working on this at all. Won't be till next week, but I'll give you guys an updated video once I get that hooked back up, once I shift the rear end over and get a couple more miles on this thing. While it's apart right now, so that's an Edelbrock 600 on the ground there. I did get that Edelbrock Holly 650, which I would like to run. I also have the geometry corrector bracket. The only issue on that Carb'd that I know of is the choke was not working properly. It's got a manual choke on it. I know he said he was having issues with that. So I know I also have a Holly 750 at the shop with a good working electronic choke. I like running the electronic ones personally, but I can run a manual one too. I think I still have a couple sets of the linkages there. I might take this time while it's apart. I'll get the intake and everything back on. It's either scramble to put the Edelbrock on or put the Holly on, which is most likely going to be the Carb'd that will stay on this car long term. I think now is the time to kind of go about doing that because I know everything else is working. But thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate all the feedback and all of the comments and complaints. And actually, I haven't had that many of those, only a few. But appreciate the feedback, appreciate the support. Let us know there. Keeps me motivated, keeps me wanting to stand out here in 35-degree weather and do stupid stuff like this. Catch you guys later.